Female mummies in ancient Egypt were always more decomposed than their male counterparts. They discovered that this was because male bodies were embalmed a lot sooner than female bodies. Female bodies were kept at the family home until they started to decompose in order to avoid necrophilia at the embalmers. How could anyone possibly know this? Herodotus in the 5th century BC. It was covered in some of the research I read when I was doing my doctorate in archaeology. This article covers it and is quite interesting. Shi-Chan and others, computed tomography of a Ptolemaic period mummy from the ancient Egyptian city of Akhmim. It wasn't until 1987 that the American Academy of Pediatrics declared it unethical to operate on newborns without anesthesia. Until surprisingly recently, the medical community felt it would be dangerous to give infants anesthesia and/or believed that they didn't feel pain. After getting stung by a cone snail, you don't feel the sting for a little bit. There is no anti-venom and it can be lethal. Treatment is basically keeping the victim alive until the venom wears off. Cone snails are pretty freaky. Some of the most deadly ones can kill you in 30 minutes or less after they sting you. Their shells are super pretty too, so any beachcomber should be aware of these creatures and know how to pick up a shell carefully just in case someone might still be inside. After graping his blindfolded victims, the Golden State Killer would be super duper quiet and pretend like he was gone, and right when the poor victims would start to move towards the phone or try to untie themselves, he would scare the fucking shit out of them. After listening to the many hours of his crimes being listed in court today, this is just a cherry on the horrible cake that is D'Angelo. I got interested in serial killers a couple days back and reading his wiki page fucked me up. Dude would wake up the suspects by shining a flashlight in their faces, make the wife tie up the husband and stack some plates on his back. He said if he heard any rattling of the plates he would kill everyone in the house. Then he would tie up and repeatedly grape the women. What a sick fuck. Human brains when they dry out smell like cat piss. That stinky ammonia smell. Worked in an ER for 17 years in Connecticut. Had a gunshot to the head come in and a chunk fell onto my shoe and didn't notice. While driving home was like, what the fuck? Did my cat piss in the car or something? Went to take my shoes off and there as was. Edit, for all you people with morbid curiosity, fresh brains look like cream cheese mixed with strawberry jam. Edit 2, no, they died, trans life harvested organs. I once knelt next to the interstate looking into a guy's open skull for 45 minutes waiting for an ambulance to show up. I didn't notice a smell. His teeth scattered around my knees were what really stuck with me. I dreamed I was wading through teeth for months. I surprisingly have very little medical dreams. One of the first-year residents said they had a dream they were chewing gum during surgery, then it dropped out their mouth and they couldn't find it and thought it dropped into the abdomen cavity. In the Czech Republic, there is a church called the Sedlice Ossuary that has decorations made entirely of human bones. This happened because there were too many people in the cemetery to bury everyone, and the church leaders claimed that if their bones became part of the church, it only made them closer to God. Nice propaganda spin there, guys. I've been there, it's fucking awesome. Just down the road is the Cathedral of St. Barbara, which is absolutely breathtaking. Kutna Hora is a very pretty town. I highly recommend the short train ride from Prague if anyone finds themselves there. Edit, Imgur URL added. Locusts aren't a type of animal, they're a condition some grasshoppers experience. Many species of grasshoppers become locusts when they're too crowded, literally their legs rubbing together triggers the change. Once grasshoppers start to swarm, they will join up with others, physically grow larger, change color, and eat basically anything they find. Most of a swarm will be born as part of the swarm. Increased mating is part of swarm behavior. This is why it often seems like locust swarms come out of nowhere. Edit, whoa, this blew up. Thank you for the awards, kind strangers. Unfortunately, I'm not an expert and my Wikipedia level understanding was super lacking for a post with this many eyes on it. Here are some corrections that have been brought to my attention in the comments. A very small % of grasshopper species swarm, and not all those that do undergo physical changes. Your garden variety grasshopper is probably harmless. Especially if you're in North America where there's only one species that swarms and it's super rare. Grasshoppers who do swarm are often called locusts even when not swarming. It's less of a grasshoppers catch locust situation, and more of a there are a subset of grasshoppers called locusts who swarm. Thank you to everyone who pointed out mistakes in my original. Add in the amount of calories they need to stay airborne, And in addition to devouring acres upon acres of crops, they also cannibalize each other in the air. When you happen to be murdered, there is only an about 40% chance that your murderer will be found and punished. Edit: a lot of people are asking which country I'm referring to. This is a worldwide approximation. There are obviously countries with higher percentages of solved murder cases, but also some with even lower. For example, in the US there is a 40% chance to get away with murder, in Mexico 90% to get away with it. Organized crime, the overall amount of crimes in that area, and war plays a huge role in this. Thanks for the encouragement. The men of the ship Essex, the true event that inspires the story Moby Dick, avoided islands after being shipwrecked for fear of cannibals. The islands were settled and landing there would have brought salvation to the survivors. Ironically, because of this bypass, the men ran out of food and were forced to eat each other for survival. You know what's even creepier? 2 of the sailors were later rescued by an American ship. They were alone at sea for so long and had to cannibalize their crewmates to survive. When they saw their rescuers, they immediately stashed bones in their pockets. They didn't seem to care that they were rescued. They were obsessed with the bones of their fallen crewmates, so they can suck on the bone marrows. Even after they were on board the ship, they refused to depart from the bones and would even attack anyone who would come close. When creating the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland, they couldn't create skeletons that looked realistic enough, so they used real human skeletons. They've since removed all of them except one. Which one? The skull on the captain's headboard. Hearing is the last thing to go after you die. You just might hear the paramedics and firefighters call off CPR. You know, that's actually kinda nice. You know that if ever you have someone dying in your arms, they're hearing you as they die. You know comforting them is working. Unless they have hearing damage. Or, the horrified screaming, moaning, whimpering of dying and maimed people that generally follows a catastrophe like a large collision or explosion. Serial killer Richard Chase took any unlocked door as an invitation to come inside. When I was in college, I was studying criminal psychology, and we had an FBI profiler and threat assessment specialist coming to talk to us. One of the things that she really hammered home, with that the best security measure you can possibly have is to just keep your doors locked. The vast majority of the time when people commit random crimes, they don't break a window or force their way inside, they just go door to door looking for the first one that's unlocked because it's easy and quiet. There was a speech made for Apollo 11 if they were to die on the moon. Side fact, if it were to happen, people would look up at the moon knowing that crew died there, and their bodies would rest there till the end of time. Not forgetting that the ocean is somewhat like this, many people died there too, at the very depths of the sea. Blobfish in its natural habitat looks like a normal fish, but it lives so deep underwater that it doesn't use a normal gas bladder to keep itself balanced. Instead, it has a spongy skin that is slightly less dense than water, which becomes damaged and bloated when fishermen bring it up too quickly. It's not really the ugliest fish. It has just experienced something worse than one of us being thrown into outer space. Between sea level and space, there's 1 atmospheric pressure of difference. Between sea level and 2,000 feet underwater, their upper limit, there's 60 atmospheres of difference. Imagine being taken 5,000 miles under the ocean, having your skull be crushed by the immense pressure, then being called the ugliest motherfucker alive. Men who are hanged get a death erection, known as rigor erectus. Pretty awkward for the family, I assume. For women, the labia fill with blood and become engorged. Equal rights, am I right? There's a parasite that enters a fish's mouth, eats the tongue and replaces itself as the fish's new tongue. In the US, if someone is kidnapped and not found within about a day, then there is a 97% chance the kidnapped person is dead. And 3/4 of them are killed within the first 3 hours of their abduction. That's why it's so important to go the police right away, and for the cops to actually act immediately instead of waiting 24, 48 or 72 hours. Edit: I'm not sure where that myth of, wait X hours to notify the police came from, but I've heard so many missing persons cases where the police wouldn't act for a day or two unless there was serious evidence of foul play because they're an adult and it's not illegal for an adult to go missing, or the teenager is with friends somewhere, or they're a runaway. Children under the age of 12 always get priority, but older ones tend to come with excuses. Valuable time wasted leads to valuable lives wasted. Jeffrey Dahmer tried to make sex zombies out of some of his victims by drilling holes in their heads while they were still alive and pouring acid into the holes. Speaking of Dahmer, I believe one of his victims, a 14-year-old boy, escaped from him naked and ran to a police station. As he was drugged and confused, the police returned him to Dahmer. This is true. Dahmer had actually injected acid into his skull and drugged him with sleeping pills, yet he still escaped after Dahmer fell asleep. Dahmer convinced the police that they were lovers and that the victim was 19 and was drunk and they had had an argument. The boy was obviously still in a stupor and was only speaking loud. Not only did the police walk Dahmer and the boy back to Dahmer's apartment, they actually noted a foul smell and went into the apartment to investigate. There was a rotting corpse in Dahmer's bedroom and they simply did not look in there before leaving. People don't take their anti-malarial drugs when they travel because they hear bad stories about the side effects and they see native people in the areas living okay without taking pills every day. The truth is, populations native to malaria endemic areas have all passed through pretty intense natural selection for survival and have a host of genes that prevent them from dying or suffering the other worst effects. Also, most of the resistance is built up over time. This is why it's most common for children to die rather than adults. Whatever people have heard about the side effects of the antimalarials, getting it is so much worse. I, fortunately, have never had it, but I study it as part of my work and people have told me about having it and they all say the same thing. It is so awful you can't believe you're even still alive. It comes in cycles, usually 48 hours, and each cycle is agonizing and brings you the brink of death. Sometimes it takes you, sometimes it spares you for another few hours until it starts again. And there are forms that, even if you clear the infection with drugs, it still remains dormant in your system and can come back at any time. Edit, I don't want to freak people out too much. There are drug combinations that can kill every stage of the parasite as long as there is no drug resistance. We lost our anti-malarial drugs for a period of 2 weeks when we visited India about 20 years ago. I was hospitalized with malaria 9 months after we came back. Edit, I need to clarify that I was hospitalized after being back in the US for 9 months. I spent a month in the hospital. Sorry for the confusion. Was it as bad as described? It absolutely sucked. It also ended up being a lot worse because I got pneumonia with it. That led to acute respiratory distress syndrome with my lungs collapsing, and I was on a ventilator for 2 weeks. Now I'm 33 years old with the lung function of a 65-year-old. Eventually, there will be more dead people on Facebook than alive. I always find it creepy yet fascinating the idea that soon we will have this autobiographical look into people's lives whom we never have even met, simply because of their online presence. Imagine a day when you could show your kids your grandparents' Facebook or Instagram account and be like, you never knew them, but this is what they were like. Half of your favorite 70s rock stars had 14-year-old girlfriends. Edit, yes, I realize your favorite rock star might not have been /be a pedo or creep, but I was so disappointed to find out how many were. I hope society is moving past where this is seen as remotely okay, but then again, people still work with Roman Polanski and he was actually convicted of drugging and raping a 13-year-old. Fuck him. 13 to 14-year-olds are children, protect children, don't sexualize them. It's not that hard. Edit 2, enjoying the artistic work of bad people is an interesting issue. I still listen to lots of the music in question, but I don't think I would if these were active artists and it was known. I wasn't alive in the 70s. And I certainly don't support them financially, well, any more than Spotify plays, so I guess I do to some degree. In Polanski's case, I have seen some of his older movies, but never paid for one. I wouldn't support him financially in any way and I wouldn't watch anything he makes at this point. I think it was Aziz Ansari who had an interesting bit asking the audience who still listens to R. Kelly, not a lot of hands, then later in the set asked who still listens to Michael Jackson, lots of hands and cheers. I think there is an issue of perceived guilt and also of artistic quality that plays into people's feelings. Regardless, I don't believe you should actively support known predators. A black mamba is the fastest snake which can slither at a speed of 12.5 miles an hour, 20 kilometers per hour. They have neurotoxins which are fast-acting. The venom shuts down the nervous system and paralyzes the victim. Its venom is able to kill 10 people and it repeatedly bites. To add on to this, there is an almost 100% kill rate and can kill in 20 minutes. The venom of a black mamba can kill a human in 4 hours if, say, bitten on the ankle or the thumb. However, a bite to the face or torso can bring death from paralysis within 20 minutes. Now, you should listen to this, cause this concerns you. The amount of venom that can be delivered from a single bite can be gargantuan. You know, I've always liked that word, gargantuan. So rarely have an opportunity to use it in a sentence. If not treated quickly with antivenom, 10 to 15 milligrams can be fatal to human beings. However, the black mamba can deliver as much as 100 to 400 milligrams of venom from a single bite. L. Driver. Cockroaches have been recorded eating human flesh, both living and dead, as well as fingernails, eyelashes, feet, and hands. The American cockroach and German cockroach are more likely to bite humans than other species. Pretty sure Australian cockroaches do something equally creepy, but as an Australian who plans to sleep at some point in the future, I'm not going to Google it. There are many studies that show they don't like human contact, and will clean themselves rigorously if they touch us. Our skin is very oily and can suffocate the breathing holes in their carapace. One reason that crows and ravens are associated with death is because they would often follow armies as they marched to battle. Being both carrion birds and extremely intelligent, they realized that a large group of armed men marching on one direction meant that there would be a tasty meal of corpses to eat soon afterwards. Mount Everest is covered in frozen corpses because removing them is very unsafe and time-consuming. They are easily viewed from the climbing routes and some are used as trail markers. What's odd is that although the bodies are prominent, in some cases there is no consensus on their identity. Like over the years, two different people with a similar description didn't return from their Everest climb, and we know the body is probably one of them, but not sure which. Or is it more creepy that some of the bodies are indeed identified, and somewhere out there is a family who knows full well that their loved one's remains are a landmark on the world's most famous mountain? Elmer McCurdy was a failed Old West outlaw. His preserved body was put on display in a traveling carnival, and years later he was eventually assumed to be a mannequin until he was used on set for the TV show The $6 Million Man. His arm accidentally fell off during the shoot, revealing bone and muscle and that he was a corpse, not a mannequin. The guy died in 1911, but it was only in 197, 65 years later, that they discovered he wasn't a mannequin, but a petrified corpse covered in wax. This is creepy indeed. Ducks become cannibals due to boredom, of all fucking reasons. They can only be stopped by cutting off their mouths. After seeing your comment, I googled this. Pro tip, don't Google this. I went against your advice and googled, subsequently came across this gem of advice. Bill trimming using commercial grade, heated cauterizing blades should be performed only by a competent operator. Man, something about that disclaimer really makes me wonder just how many veterinarians were called due to botched bill amputations that made the warning necessary. A single tiger has killed over 436 people in India, and would specifically hunt for humans. One theory is that the tiger had a missing or damaged tooth and humans were the only prey able to keep it alive due to ease of hunting and eating. I believed it lived for like 10 years too. The astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger most likely didn't die until they hit the water miles below the initial explosion. Astronaut and NASA lead accident investigator Robert Overmyer said, "I not only flew with Dick Scobie, STS-51 leader commander, we owned a plane together, and I know Scob did everything he could to save his crew. Scob fought for any and every edge to survive. He flew that ship without wings all the way down. They were alive." Sometimes an Amber Alert causes kidnappers to panic and kill the kid immediately. Edit, wow, this got way more attention than I expected. This is very rare and most of the time Amber Alerts are issued for kids taken by an estranged family member where the kid is in no danger. Amber Alerts have also saved hundreds of lives. What is an Amber Alert? It's an alert system used in the USA. If there is a report of a child missing, it will send a message to all mobile phones and some radio stations. For example, if a kid is reported missing or kidnapped in South Los Angeles, then a message will be sent to phones in South Los Angeles. Since 2007, at least 20 detached human feet have been found on the coasts of the Salish Sea. Pigs will eat anything. There are stories of pigs entering farmhouses and eating newborn humans. There was a serial killer, Robert Picton, in British Columbia, Canada, that owned a pig farm. It is believed he used the pigs to get rid of the bodies. He was only charged with 6 or 7, but there were likely dozens. CNN has had a pre-recorded broadcast from the 90s which they will premiere during the end of the world. I guess we'll be seeing that soon. Every year you live through the future anniversary of your death. Sense of impending doom is an actual symptom that often precedes your death, usually in cases of heart attack. Very creepy for some of us that suffer from anxiety and panic attacks to begin with, both share that symptom. I have a heart condition, and sometimes I'll feel a weird beat, then I will feel that horrible sense of impending doom. It is such a horrible feeling. If you begin to display symptoms of rabies, you will go crazy and die. There's no cure. Your brain will slowly melt until you're dead. Yep. Once you start showing symptoms, it's almost always too late. It's a slow, painful death. A friend in elementary school was bitten by a rabid bat in her sleep and ended up passing away from rabies. In the 5th grade. Every day we would sit on the floor in front of the school nurse and learn how she was doing that day. As a current nurse, I now know that a lot of what was told to us was insanely inappropriate for a 5th grade audience. I very vividly remember sitting on the floor with the lights dimmed. We had just finished math problems on the projector. It was cloudy and kind of dreary outside. The nurse came in and announced that she had been taken off life support. She didn't explain what that meant, and I remember how happy I was, thinking that she just didn't need it anymore and was getting better. She died the next day. This is so awful. I'm sorry you had to experience that play-by-play at such a young age, and even more sorry for that poor girl and her parents. Ugh. I think her dad wrote a book afterwards. It's Rabies Mom by Pat Carroll. I personally haven't read it, but a few in my class had, and they said that her parental situation was insane.